Shadowrun universe started all the way back in 1989 with a pen and paper RPG and eventually grew to include collectible card games and all sorts of other stuff like that. There have been video games along the way that have tapped into this kind of rich backstory, and now Microsoft has developed a video game based on Shadowrun that doesn't tap into any of that backstory and instead is kind of a basic multiplayer first-person shooter that takes a lot of things from Counter-Strike but updates it with kind of some basic Shadowrun kind of stuff with technology and magic spells coming into play to change up the gameplay a little bit. It's a multiplayer first-person shooter, so up to 16 people can play, and that breaks into 2 teams of 8. The lineage goes up against the RNA, which basically just means blue versus red. You can pick from different races, which is kind of cool. They're balanced out in interesting ways. The elves are faster, they regenerate health, but they also can't take as much damage. The humans are good with technology. The trolls are big and can take a lot of damage, but they move a lot slower, and the dwarves can absorb essence from other players or environments in the world. Essence is what you use to cast spells. Now, on top of it being a very kind of Counter-Strike themed first-person shooter where you're just kind of capturing the flag over and over again, you can also purchase these spells. And the spells are things like that'll let you teleport through walls, you can turn into smoke so you won't take as much damage, you can plant a tree that'll heal anyone standing near it, you can resurrect dead players, and these are the things that actually are kind of neat and give the game a really unique twist on what would otherwise be an extremely standard multiplayer shooter formula. There are also some tech abilities that you can purchase, but these might as well just be magic spells. It works the exact same way, and you can only equip 3 different techs or spells at the same time. So you're kind of forced to decide what kind of character you want to play, and which race, and then how you want to develop your character from there. And that again makes for some interesting combinations. While you can customize your character's abilities, you can't really customize the way that they look. If you pick an elf and you're on the lineage side, you're going to look like the same as every other lineage elf in the game. There are no skins or player models or anything like that, which gives the game a pretty generic look. There are also a few spots in the graphics that just look weird and unfinished. Like when you're climbing up a ladder, your character doesn't animate at all. And if you see other characters climbing up a ladder, it's just the standing animation just kind of floating up next to the ladder. And that's just ridiculous. That's offset by some pretty good particle effects. Some of the spells look pretty good, and overall, it's a good-looking game, but you get the impression that just too many corners were cut. There are 3 different game types in Shadowrun, but really there's only one. There are some differences between them, but they are pretty minor. There's an artifact that serves as the game's equivalent of a flag, and in one game type, both teams are trying to get to this artifact and take it to an extraction point. In one game type, one team has to defend the artifact while the other team has to try and get it. And then there's attrition, which is a little bit different in that you just have to kill the other team, and the artifact doesn't really enter into it in a major way. The tactics don't really change that much from game type to game type. Also kind of limiting the game's appeal is there just aren't very many maps in the game. There are 9 big-sized maps for 16 players, and then there are 3 smaller versions of some of those maps for an 8-player attrition match. There are 12 overall, and 3 of them are repeats, which is not a lot of games. You're going to feel like you've seen pretty much everything there is to see in Shadowrun in maybe like 2 or 3 hours. So, more maps and modes really would have gone a long way to make this feel like more of a game. Shadowrun's the first game that lets players on Vista PCs and the Xbox 360 play against each other. And, if you're looking to establish dominance over the other, there's really no clear-cut winner here. The mouse doesn't really give you that much of an advantage over the players using controllers because everyone gets a little bit of auto-aim. Even when you're using the mouse, one of the tech abilities you can purchase is called Smart Link, and that actually just gives you even a little bit more auto-aim, and you kind of just glue 2 targets and can't shoot friendlies and stuff like that when you have that equipped. So that's kind of weird if you're used to using a mouse and you feel like the mouse is kind of the extension of your hand and all that. It's weird to feel the cursor kind of be jerked away from you, and that's just kind of unsettling. But in the end, it does feel pretty balanced. You don't really feel like one control scheme is better than another. They all just feel slightly compromised in one way or another. Shadowrun starts out with a pretty tried-and-true gameplay formula by taking the round-based weapon purchasing of Counter-Strike and then spinning it out from there with all these different abilities. And it's kind of neat, but at the end of the day, they're charging full price for this game, and you know, with the number of maps included, a number of modes, the gameplay just wears thin really quickly, and at the end of the day, it's just not something you can wholeheartedly recommend.